Good afternoon, everyone. I just take the opportunity to express sympathies to those families in the bay oil industry who lost their loved ones and family through Tropical Storm Erika. I'll go straight into the areas that we can look at development outlook for the bay oil industry. In looking at that, we have three major points that we have to look at. We need to increase some resilience into the whole industry because of the unforeseen market forces that exist, some socio-economic challenges that exist with families, young people getting involved into the industry, and some of the environmental challenge which we see was very prominent in the passage of Tropical Storm Erika. Also, while we are doing that, immediately the bay oil industry needs some recovery. There needs to be some sort of compensation, some assistance and support to the farmers to allow them to continue their role playing in the industry. And while we are doing that, we look forward towards economic value adding in the long term. The bay oil industry requires serious resilience, and it has been there for over 100 years. You can go there and find bay trees that are over 100 years old, and that helped to contribute to some of the problems that we encountered during the storm, because these plants were so aged that they were not able to resist the might of the extra water that is going on the very shallow lands that they were found, especially in Petit Savan. So what we want to do is to be able to integrate some principles of sustainable development, invest in traditional and non-traditional crops, and also to adopt some public and private sector initiatives that look at the industry. The reason why we want to mention some public-private sector partnership is because you may not have heard bay oil discussed in forums of agriculture in the past. And this is maybe one of the first forums that you hear bay oil is being featured, because the government has recognized through the Ministry of Agriculture that bay oil contributes a significant portion of the agricultural economy in Dominica, and it is not just looked as a manufactured product, bay oil, but it looks at the whole agronomy aspect of bay trees, bay leaf, and what we need to do now is to introduce some new crops that help to supplement the bay oil industry. There is over 40 years of relation with the people who buy bay oil from the bay oil industry in Dominica. There's a long-term relationship in the market, and in order to capitalize on the opportunity existing in the market, we need to introduce new crops. There has been a 30% loss in the bay oil industry because of two major threats over the past 10 years. One of it was the introduction of the Gova rust disease that widespread and caused a 30% loss in the industry. And the second thing was a scare from methyl eugenol, one of the constituents of bay oil, which caused people to think that it is carcinogenic, and therefore they were afraid to utilize the bay oil in the international market. Dominica produces 60 to 80% of the world's supply of bay oil, and we are actually the leading bay oil producing country in the world. And therefore, we have an opportunity to build on that. The aged farmers' age right now is over 57 years. And therefore, a lot of the young persons who were involved in the industry have grown to an age where they can no longer participate. The risk exists now with the passage of Tropical Storm Erika, where you had over 244 acres of bay oil plantations being damaged. On top of that, we had over 250 acres that have been abandoned. So we're talking about close to 500 acres that's on the standstill right now. The recommendation is to see how we, as government, can provide some support to rehabilitate those fields, to reestablish some of those fields, and to introduce new technology, especially in the distillation of the bay. The other part that is important is that we have lost the capacities in distillery across the island. 9 distilleries were damaged as a result of Tropical Storm Erika, and also the main distillery of the cooperative was also completely destroyed. These investments need to be replaced. We estimate that the replacement cost for that would be around $1.5 million in terms of building a new distillery or assisting the individual farmers across the country. We're talking around 22 farmers we could target that could get at least $15,000, and they'll be able to rebuild, reset up, and repair some of the existing stills that are across the country so that we can build back the distillery capacity that is there. Hopefully, we are able to look to the future, and there's the potential where, as partners, government coming together with the various players in the industry, there are two main players, one who is shipping into UK market, around 20% of our supplies, and the other 80% which goes to the US market that has a very long-term relationship. Those markets will only accept new oil and more bay oil on the basis that you have additional new crops. So the whole strategy is to see how we can introduce other new oil crops. Once you introduce new oil crops, the market is willing now to accept additional supplies of bay oil. So we can go into a win-win situation. Some of those new crops that we could target is things like sweet basil, patchouli oil, and there's a famous oil, one of the most expensive oil in the world is the ylang ylang oil that we could introduce because it will help in terms of our agroforestry. It can grow in combination with coffee, with cocoa, and all our other tree crops. Most of those things are possible. The opportunity is there for farmers to invest in it. They can be, like bay, very passive in the agricultural sector, meaning that the amount of energy and intensity that you require in order to invest in those crops is not as large as you have in root crops, vegetable crops, etc. So while farmers are still doing their regular agriculture, you could also invest in those passive crops, particularly ylang ylang and the bay itself. So without much ado, I'd just like to encourage the bay oil farmers and many other farmers. You could use bay as your hedgerows on your farm. They are very good as buffer zones across the river. Once you plant those crops, you can harvest something out of it, because bay now can go as much as $100 a pound of bay oil. And it is being given to the farmers now at $57 to $64 a pound. But the potential lies for that amount to go as $100 a pound. So without much ado, I'd just like to thank you and express sympathies again to all the bay farmers who have significant loss, and I thank you.